All right. So I have on the screen, and we sent out, Denise, were folks able to get the materials that we sent?
They were shared with the committee. I'm not
Okay.
sure if it cascaded down from there or not.
No problem, no problem. So I have it on the screen, and we'll work with it on the screen. So what's on the screen right now is what we call the values wheel. And this one is really important for setting the stage. We'll move a little faster down the road, but I'm trying to set the stage where I get you thinking a little differently from the way you think now. So this is the values wheel. And each of us assign values to one of these areas. This isn't the end all be all, there are other value areas. But this was just a summation of some of the most referenced ones. So I want you to do me a favor. I want you to get a sheet of paper, and I want you to either do H for high, L for low, or N for neutral to each of these value areas. So if you value family relations very highly, I want you to put H. If physical well-being is not your thing, I want you to put L. If you're on the fence about parenting, you don't value it high, you don't value it low, I want you to put N. So I'm going to give you about a minute. Just look at it, and if you don't understand what the areas are, there's questions under each of the areas that will help you think through that. I'm going to give you a minute and a half. As many of these that you can assign an H, an L, or an N to. Let's do that. And then I want to hear from you what those value areas are. So let's take a minute.
Excuse me, could you repeat what the H, L, and N stand for?
So H, if you see an area that's a high value area for you, then we'll put an H to it. So if you know, marriage and couple and intimate relations is something that you value very dearly, then that's an H. An L would be something that you don't value. So if spirituality is something that isn't a priority for you or a value area for you, that's L. And if you're on the fence, you don't not value it and you don't high value it, then it will be an N. So that's neutral. So high, low, and neutral. And I'll give you a minute and a half for that. So you have about a minute left. All right, 30 seconds to wrap up. And you don't have to answer all right now, but just kind of highlight a few for us. All right, for the shortest 30 seconds ever recorded, we'll move on. So I'm just gonna ask for anyone on the call who selected spirituality as a high value area. Just kind of put a thumbs up there for us. All right, I see one, I see two, I see a couple. Can one of you share why? See several? Very good. Can somebody share why that area is a high value area for you?
This is Jan. I will.
Mhm.
Spiritually is high for me because when I am doing what God wants me to do, when all the others fall up under that, because if I've prayed up, if I've got my mindset, all the others fall up under spirituality to me.
Okay, very good, very good. So I'm going to ask the reverse to that question. Are there individuals who are comfortable indicating that they select their spirituality as a low value area for them? So just give us a thumbs up if spirituality was a low value area for you. I see no thumbs. All right. Now give us a thumbs up if spirituality was a neutral value area for you. I've got a neutral. All right. Now, so this is interesting to me. And you can't give a wrong answer on your value area. I want us to be clear about that. So even if we have folks in here who says spirituality was a low value area for them, that is not a wrong answer. I want us to understand that. And I can prove why that's not a wrong answer. Every single person in this call happens to be in the service, the human services industry, right? Every single one of us on this call. And our role and our goal is to provide service to the folks in the state of Georgia. I can guarantee you that in your work, you will come across individuals. It can be community members, it can be clients, co-workers, whose spirituality is not a high priority area for them. I can guarantee that. Whether or not they communicate that to you, that's a different story. But I can guarantee that there will be people whose spirituality are a low value area for you. I can say the same thing about parenting. Some of us, parenting is a high value area. Yes, give me a thumbs up if parenting is a high value area for you. Yep, I see one, I see several. All right, let's flip it. Give me a thumbs up if parenting is a low value area for you. Low value area. All right, I see a couple. Good. So here's my point. What tends to happen is that those areas that are high value areas for us, we attach a priority that goes beyond ourselves. So if I believe that parenting should be a person's #1 responsibility, and I'm in the human services area working for DFACS, and I recognize that there are a number of people who I've had to deal with, and I've had to actually get the children from them because parenting isn't the highest value area for them. Imagine my interaction with those folks based on my value stance. What ends up happening is I deal with those people very differently from the way I deal with somebody who shares the same value. Maybe I'm getting too deep for you all in some of the work that you all do, but let's just look at it from an office standpoint. Do you know who is expected to stay longer hours and work longer and volunteer for impromptu duties and projects? The folks without children. Now, the folks with children, like me, we've got a really good way of saying it. Here's what we say. Well, I gotta go to little Johnny's baseball game. You don't have to do that. So maybe you can wait for that phone call to come. I gotta run. Yeah, okay, here's the thing. I don't have to go to little Johnny's game because I'm not his parent, but that doesn't mean I don't have a life if I'm not a parent. I have a life outside of here that I require an equal amount of time for. But that's what we do. We attach the value. We take our value stance and we apply it to everyone else, and everyone that falls under that, the engagement become really different, and the engagement becomes rife with biases and prejudices, etc. We're not even really beginning to talk about race at this point. We're really talking about just a part of the model called affirmative introspection, knowing what I feel, why I feel, and how I feel the way I feel. And then being aware that those feelings, innately learned, they impact the interaction that I have with people. You layer it with race, gender, sexuality, religion, and all of that, guess what? We have a very complicated thing. So the work about diversity isn't a simple yes or no answer. It's very complicated, and I just wanted to exemplify that for you. So let's do this. Let's do another quick exercise. Each of us have identities. I started to talk about this a little bit. We have identities that fall in one or two categories. We don't have neutral identities. We usually are in a dominant identity, or we're in a subordinate identity. An identity that experiences privilege of some sort is a dominant identity. An identity that experiences less privilege or oppression of another sort is a subordinate. Now, once I throw these words out, there are people who are ready to fight because they think I'm talking white privilege. Yeah, being white is a dominant identity depending on where you are. Mostly in America, being white is a dominant identity. If you're from where I'm from, Liberia, being white is not a dominant identity. Being white would be a subordinate identity. There are privileges that being white in Liberia will experience that won't be experienced by other Liberians, but there are other oppression that you'll experience in Liberia being white that I wouldn't experience being Black. I want you to think about all of your identities that you have. And I just want you to highlight those ones that you feel are dominant and those ones that are subordinate. And sometimes it may be time sensitive, but I also want you to identify if there was ever a time that one of your identities experienced some sort of privilege because of what it was. I want you to list that under your dominant and vice versa for the subordinate. And then I want somebody to share share both. Share your dominant identity and why you believe that that particular identity is dominant, and then share a subordinate identity and why you believe that is subordinate. Any takers?
I'll share.
Go ahead, Gretchen.
Let's do Gretchen. Let's hear
Yeah,
from
go ahead.
Gretchen, and then we'll take somebody next.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I was gonna get, hi, how are you? I'm enjoying the
Gretchen.
training. Sorry, I forgot to put my virtual background on, but anyway, I just wanted to come on camera to say, hey. So I will share. I think my race makes me a lot of times in a subordinate group,
Okay.
but I think in this job, because I'm the county director, that gives me a dominant, I get a privilege for being a county director, although my race is subordinate. Is that what you're talking about?
That hits it on the head. That is perfect. That's a great example. And we'll talk about that intersection, right? Actually, tell me how that intersection plays out for you.
Okay, so the county that I am, where I work, is predominantly Caucasian. There's minority groups there. So there are African Americans, there's some Hispanics. It's people with Hispanic, origin. I think that people, usually when I have a conversation over the phone with people, and I'm right now experiencing a lot of hoarseness with my voice, so I do apologize. People are often surprised when they meet me in person, because one, they often say I don't sound like I may be African American, and then my name is Gretchen. And so people don't typically associate that with someone who is not Caucasian. And so I think that a lot of times I find myself in situations where I am the only minority in a group. And I have no problem with that, because where I'm from is a small community in West Georgia where African Americans are in the minority. So all my life, I've experienced the same thing I have at work. So it doesn't, I'm okay. I mean, I can manage that. And I think that's why I've had a successful experience, if that makes sense, because I've been doing it all my life, if that makes sense. I have to assimilate a lot of times. And so I think, but I find that when I have staff who have been in situations, maybe in the metro area, where they're not used to being in a minority situation, even though they are a minority, they struggle sometimes working in our county. And I mean, I'm just being really transparent and putting it out there. And so I think that, this is some excellent training, because I think, we always think that, I was going to say, when you asked why were people here, I just wasn't able to come off mute soon enough. But I was just going to say, I'm here because I think a lot of times we think that if people are minorities, they know all about race, equity, and diversity, when we struggle just as much as the next person. Because, I think sometimes have to overcompensate, and a lot of times causes us to have a lot of stress and anxiety too.
I really appreciate you sharing and your openness and candor. What we're doing, and I haven't even shown you the theoretical piece to it, because I wanted to start with us having these conversations and then show you what the theoretical stuff around that looks like. But we're doing exactly what's affirmative introspection. It's not judging any of those things that are identity or the circumstances around those identity. It's really just saying what is, right? And once we recognize what is, that gives us an opportunity then to say, so how do I deal with what is? But a lot of people never make it to that point where they can say, this is. And they intentionally avoid that. And those folks don't really, they're not the ones willing and ready to do the work, but learn as a part of their experiences that they have. There was someone else who wanted to share. I don't remember who it was, but feel free to share now if you can.
This is Susan Cooper. Mine's pretty different, but this is about me and my son.
Okay.
Both of us growing up were little chubby kids, and that really affected a lot of experiences, and not being in the popular group or whatever. And when he got older in high school, he was part of the drama club, which in some high schools, they are the less privileged, but Calhoun High School very values their arts there. So he was one of the drama kids. He was one of the quartet kids. So he was very popular for that reason. And I was one of the mamas. So we experienced privileges. So it's kind of that popular, not popular, which very much will affect you, and him, me both. We still have to work on our identities sometimes, because we still feel like those little fat kids, So, I mean, that, people don't think about that, but that really, really affects people.
So again, that is, you said it's different, but the core, Susan, the core of what's under there is identical.
Right.
And the understanding that that core is identical is the greatest foundation for us changing the status quo. I'll say it again. The understanding that the core of how we feel in our varying identities is foundational for the changes that we can make down the road in terms of our engagement, in terms of the spaces that we work in and identify with. Here's what I mean. Your son knows, everyone else who kind of wrote down dominant and subordinate identities, they know what it feels like to be treated less than. Is there anyone on here who knows what it feels to be treated less than? Give me a thumbs up if you can. I've got several. So I want you to just keep those thumbs up for me. I want you to just recapture one of those moments where you were made to feel less than. Recapture that moment. Take 30 seconds and just bring yourself, and you may not want to do this, but if you can, bring yourself back to that place where you were made to feel less than. I'm not going to ask you to share it, so don't be worried about that. But I just want you to bring it from the back of your mind to the forefront of your consciousness. Once you've done that, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a mental screenshot of that. And I want you to put it in your pocket, put it in your purse, put it in your jacket, put it somewhere, because you understand what it feels like to be made less than. But then I also then want you to bring to the forefront of your mind an experience you had where you know it was because you were a part of the dominant identity. You experienced some sort of privilege. Now, some of you here will say, I've never experienced privilege before. I'm sorry, that's not true. We live in a right-handed world. If you ask a left-handed person, they'll tell you. But if you're a right-handed person and you don't know what I'm talking about, I want you to look around your office and identify how many left-handed scissors exist in your office. I want you to do that for me. How many left-handed scissors exist in the office? Some of you will find 0, right? But I want you to just be curious about how many left-handed people are in the office.
You know, my son's he's left-handed too, so that's another.
Yeah, so 0 left-handed scissors in the office, but several left-handed people. Now, if you don't know what difference, and you may be thinking, what difference does it make? Okay, so if you are somebody who were able to identify that there's a left-handed scissors in the office and you're right-handed, try to use that scissors for me. And I will give you my email address to contact me and tell me about that experience. And you're going to say, oh, it's just a scissors. Try it. Try using the left-handed scissors in your right hand. My point is, because you're right-handed and because we're in a right-handed world, you don't even, a fish in water don't know it's in water. So you have experienced privilege in certain identities that you possess. Let's go back to where I wanted you to take the mental picture. Remember the mental picture about a time where you were made to feel less than? I want you now to add a mental picture of a time where you felt some sort of privilege. Well, somebody around you during that time was made to feel less than. What we end up doing, I call it amnesia. We end up getting amnesia about what it felt to be treated less than. And that amnesia is what impedes us from doing the complicated work that needs to be done. Because if I remember what it feels to be treated less than, and I tell myself, I never want to be a part of something, I never want to be made to feel that way or brought to that emotion again, then I have the word escapes me, but I have a mantra, I have a need to make sure that that doesn't happen to somebody else because I know how I felt. So when I am when I'm identified with a dominant group and there is somebody there being treated less than, I need to put my hand back in the purse, in the jacket, in the pocket, wherever I placed that feeling, I need to bring it back out and I need to say, why are we doing this? Why did you say that? Why did you do that? Why did you ask that? So that the person who's feeling less privileged can understand that there's somebody there who understands the emotion. It may be a completely different subject or circumstance, but they understand that place. And us not getting amnesia constantly about those things that are important to changing the status quo of privilege, dominance versus subordinance. Again, it's the first good step to making a change. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Is that a concept you all kind of understand? Or did I overcomplicate it for you all?
No, I think that makes perfect sense. I really do. I like that.
Any other thoughts? Thank you, Susan. Any other thoughts? Or just give me a thumbs up if you're beginning to wrap your head around it. Thank you. I appreciate those thumbs up. If you leave with nothing today, I want you to leave with the thought that I cannot continue to have amnesia about what it feels to be made less than when I am in my dominant identity. For some of us, education is what it is, right? The fact that I have in education puts me in a dominant identity in certain circumstances. One example that I give when I talk to faculty here, I talk about a white male faculty leaving here and going up to New York City for a presentation. Now, this faculty, he may be a renowned scholar down here and all of that. He gets to New York and he has his little Southern twang. And so people then in New York just automatically associate that Southern twang to mean that he's a buffoon, he's an idiot, you don't know what he's talking about, he's country, he's less than, he's less educated, and all of the erroneous assumptions that they make. Well, here, being a renowned and known faculty member, that's his dominant identity. He gets to New York, and because he has a Southern twang, folks start treating him and talking to him differently. That is his subordinate identity. When he comes back to Georgia, when he comes back to UGA, and he's in a department or in an office where somebody, a woman, is treated less than, I don't want him to forget how it felt in New York. And I want him to be able to stand up for that person and ask the 3 questions that I've asked. And I want you to write that question down. Why would you do that? Why would you say that? And why would you ask that? Just about every circumstance that you've kind of seen where somebody has been placed in a subordinate identity, you can apply one or more of those questions. So I get people who ask me, oh, you're from Africa, you were born in Africa. Yeah. Man, do y'all ride horse? Do y'all ride elephants to school? And I said, why would you ask that? And people get shocked because they've never thought about why would they ask something like that? Because inherent to that is it's a very erroneous thought that everybody from Africa has seen elephants and interact with elephants, and there's a non-modernized part of Africa. I'm like, the first time I saw an elephant was in the zoo in Richmond, Virginia. So I don't know. I never rode an elephant to school in Africa. And there's nothing wrong with riding an elephant. I think it would be a cool example, but kind of that subordination and the tone that comes along with that. But asking somebody, why would you ask that? Really gives them an opportunity to self-reflect. And Denise will put it in the chat. Why would you do that? Why would you say that? Why would you ask that? I'm going to move forward. We'll take a break in about 5 minutes. I'm going to move us a little bit forward because we've already done most of the work. These are other than being a woman, regardless of whether you're Black, you're Hispanic, Latino, or white, being a woman can be a subordinate identity as well, because most of us really don't even realize that the women's suffrage movement is pretty recent. Having some sort of a disability, a recognized or an unrecognized disability. Most of us don't know that the American Disability Act was pretty recent. And so I'm in a building, and the building is I'm in the Holmes Hunter building here at the University of Georgia. We come to UGA, it's right at the arch. It's the building right at the arch. It was named after our 2 first undergraduate students admitted, 2 first Black undergraduate students admitted to the University of Georgia. And they had a tough time right at that arch being admitted here. But now I sit in an office in a building that's named after them. And when I come to work every day to do diversity work here, I am proud of what they did and what we've been able to incrementally accomplish over time and what we can continue to work towards accomplishing here. But in this building, there are no elevators. And so I normally tell people, how many of you walked in here, or how many of you walked in the building that you're in today, if you were at work somewhere? How many of you walked in the building that you're in and was able to identify where the accessibility access is? Most of us can't. Most of us didn't even think about it. We don't know where it is. I'm in a building with no elevator. And it wasn't until about 7 years ago that somebody thought, wait, we have a financial aid office on the second floor. And so someone who's utilizing a wheelchair would not be able to get to the financial aid office because there are no elevators and they can't use the steps. So why don't we take a subset of the financial aid office and put it downstairs to be able to adequately service those folks? Again, those are some of the social architecture that has to happen in order for us to move things forward. But just being in a dominant identity and doing absolutely nothing about those insubordinate identities is what impedes the progress of the work. Thoughts, comments, questions? So I have on the screen just kind of the 4 layers of diversity, but I want to hear your thoughts, comments, questions so far.
You know, Mr. Carter, my son also lives in New York. He's very Southern, so.
I'm sure he has a wealth of interactions that are interesting,
Oh, yeah.
particularly if he has a Southern twang. Others?
I just want to comment that this is really meaningful content you're giving, and just thank you. I really do.
I appreciate it, Melissa. And I will tell you, my goal isn't for us to become diversity experts. That's not what we're trying to do in the time that we have. All I am trying to do is bring some things back here that you either already know to the forefront so that you're thinking about it as you engage, or introduce things that you may not have thought about, but that you need to think about for your own personal professional development and growth, but for your own personal professional development growth, for the professional development and organizational development and growth of the organizations that you are part of, but most importantly, to be able to provide a top tier level of inclusive service to the people who you work for, the folks in the communities all over Georgia that you service. And so I don't want you to think about being experts. I want us to continue to explore and peel back these layers. I'm going to stop here. Let's take a 5-minute break. Let's make it 7. We can come back at 11:15. The only promise I have is that we have 45 minutes and I'm going to move a little faster, but just understand there may be things in the model that we don't cover. And I'm okay with doing that if you leave with something. Does that work for folks? Give me a thumbs up if it works for you. You can mute your phone, mute your line. I'm going to mute my line and get off camera until 11:15. So join us right back at 11:15. All right, I got out of, my computer was giving me a hard time getting back on, so I logged off. Give me a second to pull that, to pull my presentation back up. And we shall commence. All right, are we ready to go? If I can get some thumbs up, we shall start. All right, I see a few. I need a few more. There we go. Looking good, looking good. All right, let me share my screen real quickly. And let's get those thumbs exercising again. Tell me if you can see my screen. Perfect. I see a hand up. I want to recognize, is it Anjanetta? Ms. Drake?
Yes, that was a mistake.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So I have on the screen kind of the model, and we've done most of the stuff on the affirmative introspection part, which is just really saying what is. So a self-awareness, bringing to the forefront of our mind. I call it getting off autopilot. Most of us, the way we go to work, if we're coming into the office, we don't even think about the road. We don't think about the stuff around us. My wife does this all the time. We would drive by a new building for a full year, and then one day she wakes up and realizes that there's a new building there, and she says, "Oh, they just put a building here." I'm like, "No, that building's been there for a year," right? Because we're on autopilot. Some of us, most of us, can close our eyes. If we wake up in the morning, we can close our eyes and walk through the bathroom and walk through our closet and do everything just because we're on autopilot. There's nothing unreasonable about being on autopilot. In fact, being on autopilot is scientific, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. The part of your mind, particularly from a diversity perspective, the part of your mind that processes right and wrong, moral values, and all of that stuff is not a big part. So it's impossible for it to process everything you do. It's impossible for it to process every thought, every action. It's just impossible. If you think about it from a just practical standpoint, when you're driving your car down the road and the person in front of you steps on their brakes, what do? You step on your brake. You don't think about the whole, wait a second. The lights on that moving vehicle just stopped ahead of me. I need to take my right foot, move it from on the gas and put it on the brake in order to stop. You don't think about all of that. You immediately stop, right? That's autopilot. So autopilot is useful because a lot of our lives are basically based on stored information. I don't mean that the stored information is good. Anybody here watch The Waterboy, the older movie with Adam Sandler? Can I see some hands for those who watch The Waterboy? Okay, good, good. Do you remember what happened when he went to college? Everything mama said started getting challenged. He automatically, because mama had a theory for every single thing, and he believed it all. And so he was on autopilot. And when folks started telling him it was different, he really had a hard time dealing with that. A lot of us are still on mama said, or dad said, or education said, or experience said. And what happens with that is it puts us on autopilot, and we never get an opportunity to take what's stored back here and bring it up front and challenge some of the perspectives and assumptions that we have. And that's what affirmative introspection is. We've done a lot of talk around that piece. I'm going to move us on to self-governance. Well, let me just give you kind of the overall of the model. We won't have an opportunity to deal with all of it, but self-governance is the action piece. So what do I now do now that I know what my preferences are? What are those things that I need to catch and respond to rather than sit down and be on autopilot? Then there's intercultural literacy, and I'll show you and I'll show you a little map. And you can do this for your county, you can do this actually for your neighborhood. But how are our cultures blended or not blended? And what is the learning that happens within cultures that we may be missing because our cultures aren't as blended as we think they are? And then last but not least, how do we build these structures that is inclusive and diverse and that we're learning and growing and contributing to? So that's the model. There we go. And we've talked about affirmative introspection. We've talked a little bit about our biases and hot buttons. I didn't go too deep into that. There was an exercise that was a part of the packet that hopefully you all would get that talks about identifying what those hot buttons and biases are. I'm not going to put anyone on the spot and ask them to identify some of those. So you can relax, it's quite okay. But I do want you to go through that exercise and kind of bring to the forefront of your mind, what are those things that just tick you off? But also understanding what makes you tick. And that was what we did with the values exercise. Most of us operate based on our values. Now, we've got those values from family, we got those values from the media, we got those values from our education, et cetera, et cetera. But those values are kind of the fuel that drives all of the actions and thought processes that we go through. And then comfort in our own skin. This one is really important because I don't know if you all realize the things that you don't like about yourself, you don't like about those same things in others. You ever get, for those who have children, you ever get really mad at your kid when you see a behavior, an action, or a response that you know you don't like about yourself? And so you're like, no, you're not going to answer me that way. I have an 18-year-old who we're in the process of looking at colleges. She got accepted into UGA early admit, and her mom and I work for the university, and we're trying to convince her that this is the place to be. And I think we're close, but we can't push too hard. But in her, I see things that I don't like about myself. I'm a procrastinator, and sometimes I see her doing, procrastinating, and I'm like, no, don't do that. But being comfortable in your own skin is really re-acknowledging those things that you may or may not like about yourself, shifting your own mental conversations about that. First, there's the personal development that happens as a result of that, but believe it or not, there's also the interactional development that happens, because then you stop judging other people harshly for those things that you don't like about yourself as well. We're not going to spend a lot of time on these three pieces, but here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to give you an opportunity to do a couple of exercises. There's nothing fancy or fantastic about these exercises, but they're really good at making the point that I'm going to make shortly afterwards. So do me a favor and turn your speaker on a little bit. Don't disturb your coworkers, so put an earphone on, because this is going to have some sound to it. But let me just get a thumbs up once you're ready for it, and just watch this video for me. All right, here we go.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
That's right, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
All right, I paused the video because I've got a question for you. In that video, a number of things changed as that video was going on. How many different changes did you notice? You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and describe some of the changes that you saw. One second here. Go back. I want you to think about it. I'm giving you some time to think about it. I'm going to forward this video a little bit. I wanted to see that.
Precisely 3:34, the time that this dastardly...
Pushing the grass in the master bedroom.
In the potting shed. But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
Sorry, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
All right. So how observant were you? How many changes did you see happen in that video as you watched? I've got the bear disappear. Somebody said 2. Anyone else? The clock on the floor. The coat change. Okay, we're getting it. We're getting it. Any others? The butler's weapon change. Yes. The man's leg on the floor. Yes. All right. So here's the deal. There actually are people on this call right now that think everybody else who wrote those things are crazy because they didn't see anything. and if we had cameras on right now, we would see those people thinking, what is wrong with these folks? There's no, exactly. So Adam said he didn't see a thing. And I see Susan, and I see her shaking her head like, I don't, did I miss something? All right, you did. Adam, I want you to pay keen attention. And I'm not just talking to Adam, I'm talking to all the other people who were quiet but didn't see anything, okay? You ready? Thumbs up so that you can see what happened. Thumbs up. I need the thumbs up to make sure you're there. All right, very good. Here we go. 21 changes.
Action. Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Well, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
And that right there on the screen is the point. It is easy to miss something you're not looking for. I'm gonna let that sink in for a little bit. It is easy to miss what you're not looking for. Actually, somebody saw the man's leg, and it was funny because it was a whole human being that changed, not just the leg. It was a completely different human being. So the folks that saw nothing, and I have to tell you, I can see Susan. You should have seen her face as the changes were happening. She was pretty shocked. The first time I watched it, I was able to pick up about 4. I certainly did not pick up 21 changes. I want us to talk a little bit about that. And this ad really was actually about, it's a campaign in England. This is a very old ad, but it's a campaign in England talking about cyclists, motorists and cyclists, and how it's easy for people to not see cyclists if they're not looking for cyclists. About 1.5 years ago, we had a faculty member who cycled to work every day get killed. And so Athens has become more of a biking community. There's cycle lanes and all of that, but it's still true. It's easy to miss something you're not looking for. I want your thoughts on this statement before we move forward. Comments, questions, thoughts, put it in the chat or unmute yourself. I want to hear from you.
So I think it's also easy to miss something when you're expecting a certain response, like from a presenter. You think that presenter's expecting a certain response and you're trying to figure out what that is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And hopefully in our short time together, I've communicated to y'all, there is nothing wrong. There's perspectives that we can talk about, but it really, I want us to put a lot on the table. I believe in conversations. And a conversation isn't one person just talking. It's where I come and I put something on the table and you come and you put something on the table and he comes and he puts something on the table. She comes and she puts something on the table. They come and they put something on the table. And what ends up happening is that when I'm walking away from that interaction, I don't just pick up what I put, but I'm enriched by what everybody else does. There's some of the things I'm going to leave there, right? But I can't leave the same way I came to that conversation. Then I've really closed my mind and I'm not seeing what I can see. Thank you for that, Adam. Any other thoughts about that?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Carter. I would like to give a thought about that. I think that my takeaway from this exercise is framework is everything. You know, if I were someone that were in acting or in studio, or I was a studio hand, I probably would have noticed all 21 pieces because that's my framework. But just because something isn't my framework doesn't mean that I can be ignorant or turn a blind eye or not look for or not entertain what other folks are bringing to the table, as you say, is their perspective. And so I think we all have to approach this as well as we move forward with willingness to learn those things we don't know.
Absolutely, Denise, absolutely. I have to tell y'all another story. So my family and my wife tricked me into fostering. She did. She had been talking for years about fostering. And I was like, you know what? We have an older daughter. She's, I guess at the time she was in middle school. Yeah, there's no need for us to enter this. And she was like, no, this is something I feel real called to do. I'm really interested in it. So I pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And then one day she decided, all right, so let's do this. We can be resource parents, meaning we can go through everything. I've forgotten the name for it now, but we can go through everything, right? Do all the trainings, and all we would do would just relieve foster parents. Say they were going on a trip and then needed somebody to keep the kids for a weekend. What is that called? Somebody help me out. I know it.
Respite?
Respite, that's it, respite. So she tells me we'll be respite parents, right? Just to give folks a relief. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I'm like, okay, so we go to a training. This was supposed to be, she's like, no, you know what, let's just go to this introductory thing. It would just be a meet and greet. We were in our first 4 hours training. 3 hours in, I call her outside. I was like, we got to have a meeting. Come on out here. Let's have a quick family meeting right now. What are we doing here? And she's like, well, this is it. So I went on board. And I will tell you that experience transformed my life. It transformed my family. And the best way I've been able to process it is seeing what it did to my daughter. Right, so our first group, so we complete everything, and our first group happened to be 4 little boys. When we were told that the youngest boy was was 3 weeks old. It wasn't true. There were 4 boys. The youngest boy was 3 months old, but he was 8 pounds at 3 months. Next to him, and they were all siblings, they were all brothers. Next to him was his other brother, who was 1.5 years. Next to him was his 3-year-old brother, and next to him was his 5-year-old brother. 4 boys. Now, we wanted to help sibling groups because we understood that there was a difficulty in having families that would take 4 kids. So we heard that we were going to get these 4 boys were coming into our home, and we were really excited. I mean, we went and bought bunk beds and the whole thing. I mean, we were excited. Those boys come, the baby we thought wasn't even going to live through the night. He was so fragile and frail. And we just loved on those boys. We understood that our role wasn't to take them. We were very specific about what we were doing. Our goal wasn't to demonize their parents or take them for hours. That was never our plan. Our plan was to hold the space for them, get them back to some sort of normalcy in whatever our perspective of normalcy is, but just give them a little bit of stability, right? And then whatever DFACS decided, if there are other family members that will come in, we support that process. But for us, our goal and our focus was those 4 boys. We never missed a court date. We never, and you all know how this stuff works. We never miss anything. I will tell you, what I haven't shared is that what we didn't know when those boys were coming in was that they were white. So I want you to imagine a very young guy like me, a very young wife, a very young daughter, 3 African Americans walking around the Loganville, Snellville area with 4 little white babies. I want you to just kind of capture that. And some of you probably saw us, right? With 4 little white boys. And it didn't take long for all 7 of us to fall in love with each other. So when we were at Chick-fil-A, we were having our time and we didn't care about people. Now, I will tell you, it wasn't easy. 2 experiences I always shared. The first one was at Chick-fil-A. We were at Chick-fil-A having lunch. And this lady came and she came very close to the table, put her hand on the table. What are y'all doing with these children? Where are their parents? See, I'm nice and I'm political. My wife isn't always. She's like, lady, we're having lunch. Could you excuse us, please? Because it's none of your business what we're doing with these kids. But we had that several times. We used to go to Ruby Tuesday every Tuesday night. And if you have kids and you don't know this, I'm gonna shatter your world. Ruby Tuesday had, and I haven't been for a long time, but kids eat free at Ruby Tuesday on Tuesdays. So it was the treat. The boys loved it. Go to Ruby Tuesday every Tuesday night. And so the folks there knew us. We had a table we would always go to. This one day we're walking in, my wife has to take a work phone call. Now we both still work for the University of Georgia. And we have very demanding work, but again, we would leave work and go to a second job, which was taking care of these kids. And we sleep for a few hours and we have to wake up at 6:30 in the 5 to leave home by 6:30, drop them off to daycare and school, and then come to Athens. And again, we live in the Snellville area. So my wife is on a work call. She's like, take the boys and get them set up, I'm coming. So I do that. And we're walking in and there's this older gentleman, it's an older white gentleman, and he looks at us. And if you can't watch the screen, I want you to watch the screen right now, because that was the look that I have is the look he had. And he was just incensed by us. And he's sitting there and he's sitting with another lady and he's huffing and puffing. And I could tell that he was angry. I had a sense of what he was angry about, but it didn't matter to me. But because it didn't matter to me, we didn't pay him any attention. He was sitting next to our table. So he listened to all the conversations and all of that. But before he left, he stood up and he turned to us and he looked at us and he said, what is this world coming to? And we looked at him and we looked at him and we smiled and never responded. Today, those boys spent 9 months with us. And it was the hardest but best 9 months ever. The boys are doing excellent. They ended up with a family member. It really is, it really and truly is one of those good stories. It wasn't an easy story. And again, I'm not gonna say the county, but it wasn't an easy story, but it is, I mean, we see them all the time on Facebook now. We're in communications with their grandmom who they're with, and they are thriving. But I want to tell you, the reason why I told that story was because even in the work, those who are here from DFACS, even in the work that you do, you cannot ignore the racial tension and bias that exist, both in the office and in the places where interactions are happening. Our second group that came in, the most recent group, we had a number of kids come through, but the second group that came in and spent about 4 months with us was a 1-month-old. This one was truly 1-month-old. So I love babies. I have a thing for babies, and COVID is really doing me bad because I see little babies, out there, and I want to go and just say, can I hold your baby for a second? But you can't do that. It's COVID time. Pre-COVID, you could walk up to somebody, hey, can I just hold this baby? I love baby. I think there's something really unique and special about them. I'm a Christian, so I believe that God himself designed babies to show us what true love is. So his 1-month-old, a 5-year-old girl, and a 7-year-old girl. Again, it so happened we didn't pick this. They were white, but they came with their own set of challenges. Now these were older, and they had been indoctrinated a certain way about African Americans. So this is what we did for the first couple of weeks, and this was around COVID time. Their visits with their families were virtual. So we would set up our computer and hide. We hid because we had experienced a lot thrown at us, both from our boys' family and from others in the places where we walked around, that we didn't want our identities to impact the interaction between us and their parents and their grandparents. And so we would hide. We would put up the laptop and we would hide. Now there was a requirement for the little 1-month-old to be seen in the visit. I never quite understood that because the dude looked very uncomfortable sitting there, but we made sure to set him up with his own computer where the mom could just see him in his car seat, because he couldn't even, he was 1 month old. There was no other way to have him visible, and we couldn't hold him because we didn't want to reveal our identities, because we knew that would impact the interaction with us and this family. But there was one day the guy is crying and we're trying to pause the screen, like pause video and fix him and then turn video back on while hiding. And my wife and I looked at each other and we said, enough of this. We went and we grabbed him and we said, we're gonna have to sit here and hold him. I know you wanna see him, but we're gonna just hold him so that you see him. Or we can get off camera with him. He's really fussy right now. We can get him ready for bed. The next day, or after the girl's next visit, we got a maltreatment in care report that we weren't using the right shampoo. Now, these were kids who came in, and my daughter spent 2 days detangling the girl's hair, but we got a maltreatment in care report. The defects came out and they looked, and there were several back and forths, and they did realize there was nothing there. But my point is, it happens. It happens, right? And did those girls, I believe, get a really good time with us? Absolutely. At the end, I remember the last day when the judge told their granddad that they could leave with him. He said, "Thank you so much for taking care of my girls." And we said, "You're welcome. It was our pleasure being in those children's lives." My point is, regardless of the area in this organization that you work, regardless of the health service that you're providing, diversity and inclusion issues are all abound. It's easy to miss when you're not looking for it. It's easy to miss when your head is so bogged down in the work. And it's easy to miss the impact it can have on the families and the connections and their interactions that are going on within your line of work. I'm going to pause here. I didn't mean those stories to go so long, but I felt like they needed to be shared. I want to hear your comments, questions, or thoughts, and then we will wrap things up. My goal is to stop right at noon, and so we'll wrap things up right at noon, but I want to hear from you. Comments, questions, thoughts.
Mr. Randolph, this is Jan. I'm white and I have biracial grandchildren. And one day I had them with me uptown, and this lady come to me and said, "Oh, you're their nanny?" I looked at her, I said, no. And I said, I'm their granny. And if you got something to say, I advise you not to. And she was just shocked. And I'm like, I don't see anything wrong with it. They're my grandbabies. And I don't understand people. I really don't. We raised our kids that we all bleed red. It doesn't matter as long as they treat you right. It doesn't matter the color or culture that they're from.
Mhm.
And I don't understand people.
And I appreciate you sharing that. My daughter played soccer at the national level, club soccer at the national level. And so we were driving her to practice 3 nights a week. And she played for Top Hat, she played for Atlanta Fire, Concord Fire, all those big clubs in Atlanta. And our first day with one of those clubs, we had the boys, and somebody did walk up to my wife and say, "Oh, do you provide childcare services?" And I started laughing because I expected her to give some sort of snotty answer. And she said, "No, actually, they're my boys." And the person was shocked and didn't want to leave. So that lady stayed there and talked for an hour because of her embarrassment to the question. But no, I hear and I know their experience. I am going to challenge you all though. We can talk to our kids about diversity and inclusion and accepting everybody for who they are and all of that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a really good step. That's my challenge to you. Do you know that your kids will hear you, but they will learn more based on who's at your dining table? Who's eating with you? Who's coming over for coffee? Who's coming over for dinner? Who's joining you at the restaurant? Right? That's where they learn the importance, not just by you saying that it's important, but the intentional efforts you make to expand your circle is very important. So I did one where you missed something. I want to do a different one. So I've got on the screen, and we'll rush through this real quickly. I've got on the screen some words. I don't want you to write those words down. I want you to just look at it. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to look at those words. Just kind of look at them, remember them if you can. All right. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to grab a little piece of paper and write down the words that you saw on that list for me. And we're not grading you, so whatever you put on there, and if you want to remember to that, it's quite okay. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to move us along. Scout's honor here. I want, how many of you, give me a thumbs up, wrote the word sleep on there? All right, I've got, all right. I'm going to show you my computer. Oh, I can't pull my thing, but I'm going to hit the back button. I can hit the forward button and it shows you, but I'm going to hit the back button. Did you see that? So I hit the forward button that was right down the word. I could go one step up, but some people will say, no, he took sleep off. So I'm going to go back to where we were and then go back to the word, where's sleep? There's no sleep. The word sleep was never a part of that list that you looked at. Here's the point. Remember the first one, we didn't see what we were looking for. The second one, we added what wasn't there. Why? Because we operate off stored information back here. That's autopilot. So if remember I talked about leaving you thinking through this whole thing about identity. I also, somebody wrote asleep, not just sleep, but asleep. I hear you. Remember I talked to you about not having amnesia on subordinate and dominant experiences in your identity? The second thing I want to leave you with, if you leave nothing else, is that you have to be vigilant. Turn autopilot off, because autopilot does two things. It allows you the comfort of not seeing what you don't want to see, but the luxury of adding what's not there. I want you to think about those two things. That's autopilot. And that's where all of our prejudices and biases and hot buttons, that's how they operate. We don't see what we don't want to see or not looking for, and we add things that are not there. All right, so I'm going to just get through just in the interest of time, because here's what I'm going to play this video. It's a very short video, and I'll show you the piece I wanted to talk to you about intercultural literacy. So here we go.
Just think about the fact that lots and lots of people are on the move. 250 million plus people live in the world where they were not born. We're living cheek by jowl with people who are very different from us. Global problems also demand that we work together. If we don't have the intercultural literacy, how are we going to get along? How are we going to solve the global problems? So the urgency is as much about global challenges we face and the backlash against those global way of being, which is ultranationalism, the kind of ethnic and religious prejudices that we bring. All of that only brings us not together, but to divide us.
So I have on the screen, and you got to get a little close to your screen to see this, but I want you to jot this down, because you can do it for yourself and you can do it for the community that you're in or that your work is primarily around. It's called the racial dot map, the racial, RACIAL dot DOT map. And you can, don't do it right now, because then I'll lose you. But once we get off, I want you to just Google the racial dot map. And you can put in the area, or you'll see the map of America, and it will be in black and white. And the black that you see are little dots for every human being that filled out the most recent census. I don't know, the one that you're looking at right now is the 2010 census. I don't know if the racial dot map have uploaded the most recent census, but let's just use 2010 as this example. So you may just see 2010 census, black dots. There's to the bottom right of the screen, it'll tell you to add color. If you add color, it goes from just how many people, and when you look at how many people, you'll see that the West Coast, the East Coast of the United States is heavily populated, and the West Coast isn't as populated as the East Coast, and even the Midwest is even more sparsely populated. When you hit add color, it breaks them down by white, black, Asian, Hispanic, and then there's the indigenous Americans. Here's the interesting thing. So what I have on right now is a zoom in to the Atlanta metro area. Now you can zoom into, again, your own community or the community that you work in. And so if that is a zoom in of the Atlanta metro area based on the 2010 census, tell me what you see. Now look at what the color coding means, but I want somebody to either in the chat or on mute and just tell me what you see. Anyone? Just look at the colors.
There's a racial divide as far as North and South goes for Atlanta, if I'm looking at it correctly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can we promote intercultural literacy right? When we live so divided, it's almost like a V, isn't it? And then we have the Gwinnett County area that you see a little bit of browns and reds, right? I want you, when you can, to do the same exercise for your area that you live in and or the area that your work has a scope around. Because if this divide remains, then intercultural literacy suffer. I can't learn about people who I'm not in any real association or proximity, who I'm not in any real association with or proximity to. It will be impossible for me to build on that intercultural literacy if I stay in my seclusion with people who look like me, think like me, talk like me, walk like me, quack like me. So in order for us to make a difference, the third point I want to leave you with is that we have to be deliberate about breaking down those lines of those invisible lines of segregation that still exist, but that because autopilot isn't off, we don't even see it. The workspaces, I talk about this when I talk about UGA. UGA happens to be a great place because there are students from all of those areas in the Atlanta area coming here. So guess what? We then become this opportunity pot for students to engage and learn. The previous video talked about global, but I want you to think Georgia. There is so much movement, cultural movement in Georgia, that we've become a hotbed for everything, for politics, for the housing market. I mean, think about it. There are folks moving from New York and California to Georgia because they can come here and work remotely in the Atlanta metro area, pay way less for property down here. And since they don't have to go into the office, they're transient. Real estate folks call it that we have a lot of transient folks working here, living and working here. Again, this map is going to look slightly different post-pandemic. My point is, we have to be deliberate. So your office spaces, your roles that get you out of these segregated living areas gives you an opportunity to be a social architect. And here's what a social architect is. The social architect is someone, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because it's just under 12. A social architect is someone who is very deliberate about making sure that the spaces that they're in, the spaces with which they engage, the individuals that they engage with, experience what we call inclusive excellence. Now, remember what I said about who the diverse people are? The diverse people aren't just the Black people, the white people, or the Indigenous Americans. No, every single one of us brings something to the table such that if I remove myself from the imperative that exists for me to contribute to building a more inclusive community in the spaces that I frequent, then I've robbed that community of what I can bring. I've robbed that community of the collective progress that can be made based on my action and your action and his action and her action and their action. So as you think through your work, as you think through your time, as you think through all of the engagement that you go about today, ask yourself, what are those things that I need to bring to the forefront of who I am that I may not be comfortable with, but I just need to recognize that? What are those ways that I need to deal with what I recognize, both for myself and for the folks that I interact with? What do I not know, and how can I go about learning about other cultures that are different from mine, other beliefs and other value systems that are different from mine? And how in my own space, whether at home, at church, at my social savings club, my neighborhood association, at work, how can I be a social architect? Building inclusive communities, one interaction, one dinner, one engagement, one kind word, one commendation at a time. Thank you all for the time. I hope I've left enough juice under your skin so that it itches. as you interact. And I'm going to turn back over to Susan and Denise.
I will say, Randolph, that definitely you left enough juice under my skin, but you also provided a balm of sorts that feels good, because I feel like I have the beginning of a way that feels genuine and authentic to try to understand the world that I'm around in a better and a more full way. So thank you for both. I mean, fantastic. Thank you so much. And I just want to say I'm really looking forward to the next time we can be together. So I appreciate it. And Denise, do you or Dan have any final words?
I just want to say thank you. Can't say thank you enough. I knew what we set the intention for this meeting, but you surpassed that in ways that are basically not describable. So thank you for your heart. Thank you for your passion around this issue. Thank you for the work that you are doing, even in your private life, fostering and caring for children, which you know is very important to each of us. And so I believe there are no coincidences. I believe that this was ordained. This was supposed to happen, and it couldn't have happened in any better way. I apologize. I had some computer glitches. My computer just completely restarted. There was an agency update that happened as I started to introduce you. So my apologies for that. But for those of you who are still on the call, I do want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about Mr. Carter and his background. And so you just absolutely know, not only did you enjoy this presentation, but I want you to know the wherewithal that he comes with, that he brings to the discussion that we just had. And so I'll read just briefly. He serves as the Director of Diversity for the Office of Institutional Diversity at the University of Georgia. In this capacity, he provides administrative and strategic leadership to the university's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives with UGA's faculty, staff, students, and partners like us. He's served in several capacities at UGA, which he mentioned to you, but prior to joining UGA, he also held leadership roles in several international development organizations, and he's co-founded Fundamentals LLC, a small consulting firm that works for nonprofit and for-profit organizations. His work spans over 20 years in regions such as Africa, where he is from, and also in North America. This work has included thematic areas such as diversity and inclusion, but also conflict transformation, peace education, leadership development, staff and community capacity building, organizational development, strategic planning, trauma counseling, and post-war reintegration. He has served as adjunct faculty for the American University's Peace Building and Development Institute, as well as senior advisor for strategic management and capacity building at the Center for Peace Building International, which is a Washington-based firm. And so he joins us with all of that wealth of knowledge, experience, and heart to bring the discussion that we had today. And are we not better for it? Mr. Carter, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you all for the time. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to our future engagement.
We will make sure that the documents get to you with this recording, the folks on the call, and then also to our other membership. Y'all have a wonderful day. Thank you again for joining, everyone, and again for this great information. All right, see ya.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.